Father threw his son into the sea to die, but before he drowned, he found what changed his life. The wind howled like a wounded animal, its fury lashing against the weathered walls of the small coastal house. Rain pelted the windows, creating a rhythmic tattoo that seemed to echo the rapid beating of Lucas's heart. The 7-year-old boy huddled beneath his thin blanket, his wide eyes fixed on the sliver of light seeping through the crack in his bedroom door. Something was wrong. Lucas could feel it in the air, thick with tension and unspoken words. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm to break, not just the one raging outside, but the one brewing within these very walls. A clap of thunder shook the foundation, causing Lucas to flinch. He pulled the blanket tighter around his small frame, seeking comfort in its familiar scent. It still smelled faintly of his mother, lavender and warmth, even though she had been gone for over a year now. In moments like these, when the world felt too big and scary, Lucas longed for her gentle touch, her soothing voice that could chase away any fear. But she wasn't here, and the fear that gripped Lucas now was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Another sound cut through the storm's cacophony, raised voices from downstairs. Lucas strained to hear, his heart racing. It was his father and stepmother, their words muffled but their tones sharp and angry. And he had grown accustomed to their arguments over the past months, each one chipping away at the fragile sense of normalcy he clung to. But this felt different. Slowly, careful not to make a sound, Lucas slipped out of bed. The cold floor sent a shiver up his spine as he crept towards the door, drawn by an inexplicable need to understand what was happening. "I can't do this anymore, David." His stepmother's voice, usually so controlled, cracked with emotion. "It's him or me. You have to choose." Lucas froze, his small hand clutching the doorframe. "Him? Who are they talking about?" "Karen, please." His father's voice weary and defeated. "He's just a boy." "A boy who reminds you of her every single day. Don't you see what it's doing to us? To our family?" Family. The word echoed in Lucas's mind, hollow and meaningless. Since when had they been a family? Since his mother's death, since this stranger had moved into their home, bringing with her cold silences and disapproving glares? Another thunderclap shook the house, and with it came a sob, not from the storm, but from Lucas himself. He clapped a hand over his mouth, terrified of being discovered, of facing the consequences of knowledge he was never meant to have. In that moment, as the storm raged both inside and out, Lucas felt more alone than he ever had before. The darkness of the night seemed to press in on him from all sides, threatening to swallow him whole. Little did he know, this night would mark the beginning of a journey that would test the very limits of his strength, resilience, and capacity for love. For now, though, he was just a frightened boy, standing on the precipice of a change that would alter the course of his life forever. The storm continued to rage, its fury a pale reflection of the tempest about to be unleashed in young Lucas's world. Lucas's small body trembled as he pressed himself against the wall, straining to hear every word of the heated argument below. The voices of his father and stepmother rose and fell like the tumultuous waves crashing against the nearby shore, each word cutting deeper than the last. "I'm done, David." Karen's voice exploded, shattering the tense silence. "I can't stand living with Lucas any longer. He's a constant reminder of your past, of her. Don't you see what it's doing to us? To our son?" Lucas flinched at the venom in her voice. Our son? The word stung, a stark reminder of his outsider status in what was supposed to be his own home. He thought of his half-brother, barely a year old, sleeping peacefully in the nursery, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. "Karen, please," his father's voice was weary, defeated. "What do you expect me to do? He's my son." "Is he? Or is he just a ghost, haunting us with memories of your dead wife?" Karen's words dripped with bitterness. "You have to decide, David. It's either him or me and our baby. I won't live like this anymore." Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Lucas held his breath, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure they would hear it. Surely his father would defend him, would choose him. He had to. But the silence stretched on, punctuated only by the howling wind outside, and in that silence Lucas felt his world begin to crumble. I don't know what to do," David finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Well, you'd better figure it out soon," Karen snapped. "I'm taking the baby and leaving tomorrow if you don't make a decision." Lucas stumbled back from the door, his mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. His father wouldn't abandon him, would he? But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with each passing second of his father's silence. He crawled back into bed, pulling the covers over his head as if they could shield him from the harsh reality of what he'd just heard. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched his mother's old sweater, inhaling deeply, trying to remember her scent, her warmth, her love. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time seemed to warp and twist in the darkness of his room. Then, suddenly, the door creaked open. Lucas froze, hardly daring to breathe. "Lucas," his father's voice was gruff, emotionless. "Get up, we're going for a walk." Confusion and fear warred within him as he slowly sat up. "A walk? But it's the middle of the night, Dad." "Don't ask questions, just come." The drive to the docks was silent, the tension in the car so thick Lucas could barely breathe. He watched the familiar streets slip by, illuminated by the harsh glare of street lights, each turn taking him further from the safety of home and into unknown territory. So the smell of salt and seaweed filled the air as they approached the harbour. Lucas's father parked the car and got out without a word, striding towards a small motorboat tied to the dock. Lucas scrambled to keep up, his short legs working overtime on the slippery wooden planks. "Dad," he ventured, his voice small against the vastness of the dark ocean before them. "Where are we going?" His father didn't answer, focused on untying the boat and starting the engine. The motor roared to life, shattering the eerie quiet of the deserted harbour. With a lurch, they set off into the inky blackness of the open sea. Lucas huddled in the bow, wrapping his arms around himself against the biting wind. The further they went from shore, the more dread pooled in his stomach. Something was terribly wrong. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the boat slowed to a stop. They were surrounded by darkness on all sides, the lights of the town nothing more than a distant glimmer on the horizon. "Dad," Lucas tried again, his voice trembling. "What's going on?" His father turned to him then, and Lucas recoiled at the look in his eyes. There was no warmth there, no love, only a cold, terrible resolve. "I'm sorry, Lucas," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but I have to do this. For Karen, for the baby, for our family." Before Lucas could react, before he could plead or cry out, his father's hands were on him. Strong, unyielding hands that had once held him with love now gripped him with cruel intent. In one swift motion, David lifted his son and tossed him overboard. The shock of the icy water drove the air from Lucas's lungs. He flailed wildly, panic overtaking him as the waves closed over his head. Through the rushing in his ears, he heard the boat's engine roar to life once more. Breaking the surface, Lucas gasped for air, his eyes stinging from the salt water. "Dad!" he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. "Dad, please, don't leave me!" But the boat was already moving away, cutting through the waves with ruthless efficiency. Lucas could just make out his father's silhouette, standing rigid at the helm, not looking back. "Dad!" he cried again, but his voice was lost to the wind and waves. As the boat disappeared into the darkness, Lucas was left alone in the vast, uncaring ocean. The realization of what had just happened crashed over him like a tidal wave. His own father had tried to kill him, had left him to die in the cold, unforgiving sea. Tears mixed with the salt water on his face as he struggled to stay afloat. The waves seemed to grow larger, each one threatening to pull him under. In that moment, surrounded by darkness and betrayal, Lucas had never felt so small, so utterly alone. But something within him, some spark of defiance, refused to give up, His mother's voice echoed in his memory, "You're stronger than you know, my little sea star." With those words ringing in his ears, Lucas began to swim, fighting against the current, against the weight of betrayal, against death itself. The battle for survival had begun, and Lucas was determined to win. The icy water engulfed Lucas, shocking his system and driving the air from his lungs. For a moment, panic overwhelmed him as he sank beneath the surface, the weight of his father's betrayal pulling him down into the depths. But as the initial shock subsided, a primal instinct for survival kicked in. Lucas's arms and legs began to move, muscle memory taking over as he fought his way back to the surface. His head broke through the waves, and he gasped for air, his lungs burning. The taste of salt was bitter on his tongue, a cruel reminder of the vast, uncaring ocean that now surrounded him. As he treaded water, Lucas's mind raced. How could his father do this to him? The man who had once held him close, who had taught him to ride a bike and tie his shoes, had just left him to die in the middle of the ocean. The pain of betrayal was almost as suffocating as the water itself. But beneath the pain and fear, a small voice whispered in the back of his mind. It was his mother's voice, gentle yet strong, a memory from long ago. "Remember, my little sea star," she had said during one of their beach trips. "The ocean may seem vast and scary, but it's also full of life and wonder. You're stronger than you know, Lucas. Never forget that." Those words, once a comforting bedtime story, now became a lifeline. Lucas took a deep breath, steadying himself against the rolling waves. He was his mother's son, and he would not give up without a fight. With newfound determination, Lucas began to swim. He had no idea which direction would lead him to safety, but he knew that staying still meant certain death. The waves crashed over him, each one threatening to pull him under, but he pushed through, his small arms cutting through the water with surprising strength. As he swam, memories of happier times flashed through his mind. Summers spent at the beach with his mother, building sandcastles and chasing waves. The pride in her eyes as she watched him master each new swimming stroke. The warmth of her embrace as she wrapped him in a towel after a long day in the sun. Those memories fueled him, pushing him forward even as his muscles began to ache and fatigue set in. Lucas refused to let the ocean claim him, refused to let his father's betrayal be the end of his story. Hours seemed to pass, though it was impossible to tell in the darkness. The moon, partially obscured by clouds, offered little light to guide his way. Lucas's strokes became slower, less coordinated, but still he pressed on. His body was numb from the cold, his mind foggy from exhaustion, yet something deep within him refused to give up. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, when Lucas's strength was all but spent, a faint light appeared on the horizon. At first he thought it was a hallucination, a cruel trick of his desperate mind. But as he blinked away the salt water from his eyes, the light grew stronger, more defined. It was a ship, its deck illuminated against the night sky like a beacon of hope. With the last reserves of his strength, Lucas changed course, swimming towards the light. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of exhaustion and desperate hope. Would they see him? Could they hear his cries for help over the sound of the waves? As the ship drew closer, Lucas mustered every ounce of energy he had left. He waved his arms frantically, his voice hoarse as he shouted into the night, "Help! Please help me!" On the deck of the yacht, a figure appeared, peering out over the railing. For a moment time seemed to stand still as Lucas locked eyes with the stranger. Then, suddenly, everything burst into motion. "Man overboard!" The cry rang out across the water, followed by a flurry of activity on the ship's deck. As a lifeboat was quickly lowered into the water, Lucas felt the last of his strength ebbing away. He had made it this far, had defied the odds and survived against all hope. Now, with salvation so close at hand, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. The lifeboat's searchlight cut through the darkness, illuminating Lucas's small form in the water. Strong hands reached out, grasping him and pulling him to safety. As he was lifted from the ocean's grasp, Lucas finally allowed the tears to come, tears of relief, of fear, of the overwhelming emotions that had been held at bay by sheer will to survive. Wrapped in warm blankets, surrounded by the concerned faces of his rescuers, Lucas felt the weight of his ordeal crash over him. He was alive against all odds. But as the adrenaline faded and the reality of what had happened began to sink in, he realized that survival was just the beginning. His journey, it seemed, was far from over. As this gripping tale of survival unfolds, we can't help but wonder what challenges and triumphs await young Lucas. Will he find the strength to overcome this unimaginable betrayal? What twists and turns does fate have in store for him? To find out, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next installment of Lucas's extraordinary journey. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring more incredible stories like this one to life. Stay tuned and remember, sometimes the greatest strength emerges from the darkest moments. Victor stood at the helm of his yacht, his weathered hands steady on the wheel, as he guided the vessel back to shore. His eyes, sharp despite the late hour, kept darting to the small figure huddled under a pile of blankets near the stern. The boy they had pulled from the sea, Lucas he'd said his name was, hadn't spoken a word since they'd brought him aboard, save for a few mumbled thank yous when handed dry clothes and hot tea. As the lights of the marina came into view, Victor felt a strange tightness in his chest. He'd seen a lot in his years at sea, but never anything quite like this. A child alone in the middle of the ocean in the dead of night? It didn't take a genius to figure out that something terrible had happened to the boy. "Sir," one of his crew members approached, breaking Victor from his thoughts. "We're nearly at port. Should I call the authorities?" Victor hesitated, his gaze once again drawn to Lucas. The boy sat motionless, staring out at the dark water with eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. In that moment, Victor made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "No," he said firmly, "not yet. Let's get him settled first. He's been through enough tonight." As they docked, Victor approached Lucas slowly, as one might a wounded animal. "Hey there, kiddo," he said softly, crouching down to the boy's eye level. "We're back on land now. How about we get you somewhere warm and comfortable, yeah?" Lucas looked up at him, his blue eyes wide and wary. For a long moment he said nothing, and Victor feared he might have pushed too far too fast. But then, almost imperceptibly, the boy nodded. Victor's penthouse apartment was a far cry from the modest home Lucas had known. As they stepped out of the elevator, the boy's eyes widened, taking in the expansive living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But there was no excitement in his gaze, only a sort of detached wonder, as if he were observing a scene from a movie rather than his current reality. "Make yourself at home," Victor said, gesturing to the plush sofa. "Are you hungry? I can whip up some pancakes if you'd like." At the mention of food, Lucas's stomach growled audibly, reminding them both that it had been hours since the boy had eaten. A faint blush colored his cheeks, the first real sign of life Victor had seen in him since the rescue. "Pancakes it is," Victor chuckled, heading to the kitchen. As he mixed the batter and heated the griddle, he kept a watchful eye on Lucas. The boy hadn't moved from his spot on the sofa, his small frame dwarfed by the large piece of furniture. He sat with his knees pulled up to his chest, arms wrapped tightly around them, as if trying to make himself as small as possible. The smell of cooking pancakes eventually drew Lucas out of his shell. He padded quietly into the kitchen, bare feet silent on the cool tile floor. Victor pretended not to notice, focusing on flipping a perfectly golden pancake onto a plate. "There you are," he said casually, sliding the plate across the counter. "Syrup's right there if you want it. Dig in." Lucas hesitated for a moment before climbing onto one of the high stools at the kitchen island. He picked up the fork Victor had set out, but didn't start eating immediately. Instead, he looked up at Victor, his brow furrowed slightly. "Why are you being so nice to me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question caught Victor off guard. He paused in the act of pouring more batter onto the griddle, considering his answer carefully. "Because you needed help," he said finally. "And because it's the right thing to do." Lucas seemed to mull this over as he took his first bite of pancake. For a moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the soft sizzle of batter on the hot griddle. Then, so quietly Victor almost missed it, Lucas spoke again. "My dad tried to kill me." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrible. Victor's hand tightened on the spatula he was holding, a surge of anger rising in his chest. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm for Lucas's sake. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "What your father did was wrong. Very, very wrong. But you're safe now, okay?" Lucas nodded, but Victor could see the doubt in his eyes. How could the boy feel safe after what he'd been through? Trust, Victor realized, would have to be earned slowly and carefully. As Lucas ate, Victor's mind raced. What was he supposed to do now? He couldn't just hand the boy over to the authorities, not without knowing the full story. But he also couldn't keep a child who wasn't his, could he? The thought brought with it a fresh wave of pain. Victor had always wanted children, had dreamed of a house full of laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. His wife, Sarah, had passed away 5 years ago after a long battle with cancer. They had been trying for a baby when she was diagnosed. In the years since her death, Victor had thrown himself into his work, building his shipping empire and trying to ignore the emptiness in his heart. Now, watching Lucas carefully cut his pancake into small, precise squares, Victor felt something stir within him. A protectiveness, a desire to shield this child from any further harm. "Lucas," he said softly, waiting until the boy looked up at him, "I want you to know that you can stay here as long as you need to. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Lucas's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He stared at Victor, searching his face for any sign of deception. Finding none, he lowered his fork back to the plate. "You mean it?" he asked, his voice small and hesitant. You won't send me away?" The vulnerability in those words nearly broke Victor's heart. "I promise," he said solemnly. "You're safe here, Lucas. I won't let anyone hurt you." Something in Lucas's expression shifted then, a tiny spark of hope flickering to life in his eyes. He didn't smile. Victor suspected it would be a long time before he saw the boy truly smile, but some of the tension seemed to leave his small frame. As Lucas finished his pancakes, Victor's mind was already whirring with plans. He'd need to contact his lawyer, figure out the legalities of the situation. And Lucas would need clothes, school supplies, probably therapy to help him process the trauma he'd endured. It would be a challenge, no doubt about it, but looking at the boy sitting at his kitchen counter, Victor knew with absolute certainty that it was a challenge he was ready to face. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Victor's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, worked tirelessly to navigate the complex legal waters of their situation. There were interviews with Child Protective Services, mountains of paperwork to fill out, and tense negotiations with the authorities, who were understandably suspicious of the circumstances. Through it all, Lucas remained quiet and withdrawn. He flinched at loud noises and startled easily, his eyes constantly darting around as if searching for threats. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to relax in Victor's presence. The first time Lucas reached for Victor's hand as they walked through a crowded mall, Victor felt a lump form in his throat, equal parts joy and sorrow for all this child had endured. It was a month after the rescue when Elena called with news. "We've got temporary guardianship," she said, her voice triumphant. "It's not a full adoption yet, but it's a start. Lucas can stay with you officially now." Victor's heart soared at the news. He found Lucas in the guest room, soon to be his room permanently, curled up with a book. "Hey, kiddo," he said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "I've got some good news." Lucas looked up, his expression guarded but hopeful. Victor sat down on the edge of the bed, taking a deep breath. "The judge has granted me temporary guardianship," he explained. "That means you can stay here with me officially, if that's what you want." For a long moment, Lucas said nothing. Then, to Victor's surprise and delight, the boy launched himself forward, wrapping his arms tightly around Victor's waist. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice muffled against Victor's shirt. "Thank you for not sending me away." Victor hugged him back, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. "Never," he promised. "You're stuck with me now, kid." As Lucas pulled back, Victor saw the ghost of a smile on his face, the first he'd seen since that terrible night. It was small and fleeting, but it was there, and in that moment, Victor knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The journey of healing and trust had only just begun, but with each passing day, the bond between Victor and Lucas grew stronger. They were an unlikely pair, the wealthy shipping magnate and the boy rescued from the sea, but somehow they fit. Two lonely souls finding in each other the family they had both been missing. As they sat together that evening, Victor reading aloud from one of Lucas's favorite books, he couldn't help but marvel at the twists of fate that had brought them together. The road ahead would not be easy, he knew. There would be nightmares to soothe, trust to rebuild, and a long legal battle to make their arrangement permanent. But looking at Lucas, curled up beside him and listening intently to the story, Victor knew that it was all worth it. For the first time in years, his home felt truly alive. And though the wounds of the past were still fresh, there was hope now, hope for healing, for growth, and for the kind of love that can weather any storm. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Victor's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the kitchen. Lucas sat at the counter, his legs swinging nervously as he pushed his cereal around in the bowl. Today was the day he'd been both anticipating and dreading, his first day at his new school. Victor bustled around the kitchen, packing a lunch with the kind of meticulous care usually reserved for defusing bombs. "Okay, kiddo," he said, zipping up the lunchbox. "We've got your favorite sandwich, some carrot sticks, an apple, oh, and I threw in a little treat. Don't tell Elena." He winked conspiratorially, and Lucas felt the corners of his mouth twitch upward. It wasn't quite a smile, those were still rare, but it was something. "You ready for this?" Victor asked, his tone gentle but encouraging. Lucas shrugged, his eyes fixed on his bowl. "I guess," he mumbled. Victor crouched down beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Hey, it's okay to be nervous. New schools are tough, but remember what we talked about?" Lucas nodded, reciting the words they'd practiced. "I'm brave, I'm smart, and I can do this." "That's right," Victor said, giving his shoulder a squeeze. "And if you need anything at all, you just call me, okay? I'll be there in a flash." As they drove to the school, Lucas pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the car window, watching the city blur by. His stomach churned with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Part of him longed for the normalcy of school, for a chance to be just another kid in the crowd. But another part, the part still raw from betrayal, whispered that it wasn't safe to let his guard down. The car pulled up to the imposing brick building of Westfield Academy. Children streamed through the gates, laughing and chattering with their friends. Lucas felt his breath catch in his throat. "You've got this, champ," Victor said, giving him an encouraging smile. "Remember, I'm just a phone call away." Lucas nodded, swallowing hard. He reached for the door handle, then paused. "Thank you," he whispered. Victor's eyes were suspiciously bright as he hugged Lucas back. "Anytime, kiddo. Now go show him what you're made of." With a deep breath, Lucas stepped out of the car and into the bustling schoolyard. The noise and activity were overwhelming after the quiet of Victor's apartment. He clutched his backpack straps tightly, trying to look confident as he made his way to the main entrance. "Hey, new kid." Lucas turned to see a group of boys around his age approaching. The one in front, a tall boy with spiky blonde hair, grinned at him. "I'm Jake," he said. "You must be Lucas, right? Mrs. Thompson told us we were getting a new student today." Lucas nodded, relief washing over him. "Yeah, that's me." "Cool," Jake said. "Want to hang with us before class? We were just talking about the new Spider-Man movie." For a moment, Lucas hesitated. Trust didn't come easily anymore. But as he looked at Jake's friendly face and the curious expressions of the other boys, he felt something inside him shift. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to take a chance. "Sure," he said, his voice stronger than he expected. "That sounds great." As he fell into step with his new classmates, Lucas felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in his chest. The day ahead still loomed large and uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel quite so alone. The classroom buzzed with activity as students settled into their seats. Lucas sat near the back, his eyes darting nervously around the room. So far, things had been going okay. Jake and his friends had been friendly, and no one had asked any prying questions about why he'd transferred in the middle of the school year. Mrs. Thompson, a kind-faced woman with graying hair, called the class to order. "Everyone, I'd like you to welcome our new student, Lucas," she said, gesturing towards him. "I hope you'll all make him feel at home here at Westfield." Lucas felt his cheeks heat up as 24 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. He managed a small wave, relieved when Mrs. Thompson quickly moved on to discussing their upcoming history project. As the morning progressed, Lucas found himself slowly relaxing. The familiar routine of classes and assignments was comforting, a slice of normalcy in a life that had been anything but normal lately. During group work, he even found himself contributing ideas, surprised by how easily the other kids accepted his input. But the peace was shattered at lunchtime. Lucas sat with Jake and his friends in the bustling cafeteria, picking at his sandwich as the others chatted animatedly about a video game. Suddenly, a loud crash from a nearby table made him jump, his heart racing. In an instant, he was back on that boat, the cold wind whipping around him, his father's emotionless face the last thing he saw before hitting the water. "Ooh, you okay?" Jake's voice cut through the panic, concern etched on his face. Lucas realized he was shaking, his breath coming in short gasps. "I am fine," he managed to stammer, just startled. The other boys exchanged glances, clearly not buying it. "Are you sure?" another boy, Tim, asked. "You look really pale." "Maybe you should go to the nurse," Jake suggested. Lucas shook his head vehemently. "No, really, I'm okay. I don't like loud noises sometimes." There was an awkward silence as the boys digested this information. Lucas braced himself for the questions, the judgment, maybe even mockery. But to his surprise, Jake just nodded. "That's cool," he said casually. "My little sister's the same way. Did you guys hear about the new game coming out next month?" Just like that, the conversation moved on. Lucas felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. These kids didn't know his story, didn't understand why a simple loud noise could send him into a panic. But they accepted him, without question. The rest of the day passed in a blur. By the time the final bell rang, Lucas felt drained but oddly accomplished. He'd made it through his first day, had even made some potential friends. As he walked out of the school gates, he spotted Victor's car waiting for him. "Hey, kiddo," Victor called, waving from the driver's seat. "How did it go?" Lucas climbed into the car, buckling his seatbelt before answering. "It was okay," he said, surprised to find he meant it. "But I think I might like it here." Victor's face lit up with a grin. "That's great, Lucas. I'm so proud of you." They drove home. Lucas filled Victor in on the day's events, the friendly classmates, the interesting lessons, and yes, even the moment of panic at lunch. Victor listened attentively, asking questions and offering words of encouragement. "You know," Victor said as they pulled into the parking garage of their building, "it's normal to have moments like that after what you've been through. But you handled it really well. And it sounds like you've got some good kids in your class." Lucas nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I think so too." That night, as Lucas lay in bed, he reflected on the day. It hadn't been perfect. The panic attack at lunch had been scary, and there were moments when he'd felt overwhelmed by all the newness. But overall it had been good. He'd taken a step forward, a step towards healing. As he drifted off to sleep, Lucas felt a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in a long while, he looked forward to what tomorrow might bring. The weeks that followed saw Lucas settling to a routine at Westfield Academy. He threw himself into his studies, finding solace in the structure and challenge of his classes. His teachers were impressed by his intelligence and work ethic, often praising him for his insightful comments and well-researched assignments. But while Lucas excelled academically, social interactions remained a challenge. He had formed a tentative friendship with Jake and his group, joining them for lunch and occasionally hanging out during free periods. Yet there was always a part of him that held back, afraid to let anyone get too close. One day, about a month into the school year, Lucas's history teacher announced a group project. "You'll be working in pairs," Mrs. Thompson explained, "to create a presentation on a significant historical figure of your choice." Lucas felt his stomach clench. Group projects meant working closely with someone, possibly even meeting outside of school, and the thought made him anxious. "Lucas," Mrs. Thompson called, "you'll be working with Emma." He turned to see a girl with curly red hair and freckles smiling at him from across the room. Emma was quiet like him, but always seemed to have a kind word for everyone. As the class shuffled around to sit with their partners, she made her way over to his desk. "Hi, Lucas," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "Looks like we're a team." Lucas managed a small smile in return. "Yeah, I guess so." As they began brainstorming ideas for their project, Lucas found himself relaxing slightly. Emma was easy to talk to, never pushing too hard when he fell silent or changed the subject abruptly. They decided to focus their presentation on Harriet Tubman, both drawn to her story of courage and resilience. "And we should probably meet up outside of class to work on this," Emma said as the bell rang. "And maybe this weekend?" Lucas hesitated. The thought of someone coming to Victor's apartment, seeing the life he now led, made him uncomfortable. But before he could make an excuse, Emma spoke again. "We could meet at the library if you want," she suggested, seeming to sense his discomfort. "They have those study rooms we could use." Relief washed over him. "Yeah, that sounds good," he agreed. As he left school that day, Lucas felt a mix of emotions. He was nervous about spending time with Emma outside of class, but there was also a tiny spark of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of a real friendship. When Saturday arrived, Lucas found himself standing outside the public library, his backpack heavy with books and his laptop. Emma waved to him from the steps, her red curls bouncing as she bounded down to meet him. "I got us one of the study rooms," she said, leading the way inside. "It's nice and quiet back there." As they settled into the small room, spreading their materials across the table, Lucas felt some of his tension ease. The library was a safe space filled with books and knowledge. Here, he could focus on the task at hand without worrying about revealing too much of himself. They worked steadily for a couple of hours, researching Harriet Tubman's life and organizing their presentation. Lucas found himself becoming absorbed in the project, his usual guardedness slipping away as he and Emma discussed Tubman's bravery and the impact of her actions. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Emma said, her eyes shining with admiration. How much strength she had to keep going back and rescuing more people, even when it was so dangerous. Lucas nodded, thinking about his own journey. "Yeah," he said softly. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just keep going, even when everything seems impossible." Emma looked at him curiously, and for a moment, Lucas feared he'd said too much. But she just smiled, a look of understanding in her eyes. "That's really true," she agreed. "I think everyone has their own underground railroad to navigate sometimes." The simplicity and truth of her words struck Lucas deeply. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of connection with someone his own age, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. As they packed up their things at the end of the study session, Emma turned to him with a slightly hesitant expression. "Hey Lucas, a bunch of us are going to the movies next weekend. Would you maybe want to come?" Lucas blinked, surprised by the invitation. His first instinct was to say no, to retreat back into the safety of isolation. But something made him pause. He thought about Victor's encouragement to try new things, to take small steps towards healing. He thought about the way Emma had made him feel understood without even knowing his story. "Ah yeah," he found himself saying. "That sounds fun. Thanks." Emma's face lit up with a grin. "Great. I'll text you the details." As Lucas walked home, he felt a strange lightness in his chest. The day hadn't been perfect. There had been moments of anxiety, times when he'd had to take deep breaths to stay calm. But overall, it had been good. He'd made progress on the project, had a meaningful conversation, and even taken a step towards expanding his social circle. When he got back to the apartment, Victor was in the kitchen, attempting to cook what looked like a very ambitious pasta dish. "Hey kiddo," he called, waving a sauce-covered spoon in greeting. "How was your study session?" Lucas set his backpack down, a small smile playing at his lips. "It was nice," he said. "Emma's cool. And we got a lot done on the project." Victor beamed, clearly thrilled to see Lucas opening up. "That's fantastic, Lucas. I'm so glad you had a good time." As they sat down to eat, the pasta turning out surprisingly edible, Lucas found himself recounting the day's events, the research they'd done, the conversation about bravery, and even the movie invitation. Victor listened attentively, his face a mixture of pride and barely contained joy. "You know," Victor said as they cleared the dishes, "I'm really proud of you, Lucas. I know none of this has been easy, but you're doing so well. You're so much braver than you give yourself credit for." Lucas felt a warmth spread through his chest at Victor's words. He still had a long way to go, still had days when the weight of his past felt overwhelming. But moments like this, sharing a meal with Victor, making connections at school, slowly building a new life, gave him hope. That night, as he lay in bed, Lucas thought about Harriet Tubman and her unwavering courage. He thought about Emma's words, about everyone having their own underground railroad to navigate. And he thought about Victor, the man who had become more than just a guardian, he had become family. Lucas closed his eyes, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth. But for now, in this moment, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. He felt safe, he felt supported, and most importantly, he felt hope for the future. The soft glow of the lamp cast long shadows across the therapist's office as Lucas settled into the plush armchair. Dr. Amelia Chen, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, sat across from him, her notepad balanced on her knee. It was Lucas's third session, and the nerves that had nearly overwhelmed him during the first two visits had dulled to a manageable anxiety. "How are you feeling today, Lucas?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice warm and encouraging. Lucas shrugged, his fingers absently tracing the pattern on the armrest. "Okay, I guess," he mumbled. Dr. Chen nodded, her pen poised over her notepad. "I heard you had quite a week at school. Would you like to tell me about it?" For a moment Lucas hesitated. Talking about his feelings, about the things that happened to him, still felt strange and uncomfortable. But he remembered Victor's words from that morning. "It's okay to open up, kiddo. Dr. Chen is here to help." Taking a deep breath, Lucas began to recount the events of the past week. He told Dr. Chen about the history project with Emma, about the invitation to the movies, and about the moments of panic that still caught him off guard sometimes. "There was a fire drill at school yesterday," Lucas said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The alarm was so loud and everyone was rushing around. I froze, I couldn't move. It felt like I was back on that boat, with the waves crashing and—" He trailed off, his hands clenching into fists as the memory washed over him. Dr. Shen leaned forward slightly, her expression compassionate. "That must have been very frightening for you, Lucas," she said gently. "Can you tell me what happened next?" Lucas took a shaky breath. Emma, she noticed I wasn't moving. She came back for me, took my hand, and led me outside. She didn't ask any questions, just stayed with me until I calmed down. A small smile tugged at Dr. Chen's lips. It sounds like Emma is a good friend. How did it feel to have someone support you in that moment? It was nice, Lucas admitted. Scary because I thought she might think I was weird or broken. But she didn't. She just helped. Dr. Chen nodded, jotting something down in her notepad. Lucas, what you experienced during the fire drill is called a triggering event. It's very common for people who have been through traumatic experiences to have strong reactions to things that remind them of the trauma. The loud noise and the chaos likely reminded your body and mind of the night on the boat. Lucas nodded slowly, relief washing over him at having a name for what he'd experienced. So, I'm not going crazy. Not at all, Dr. Chen assured him. Your reactions are a normal response to an abnormal situation. What's important is that we work on developing coping strategies to help you manage these moments when they occur. For the next hour, Dr. Chen guided Lucas through various relaxation techniques. They practiced deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, and even a simple grounding technique using the 5 senses. Remember, Lucas, Dr. Chen said as their session drew to a close, healing isn't linear. There will be good days and bad days. The goal isn't to never feel afraid or anxious again, but to build the tools to handle those feelings when they arise. As Lucas left the office, he felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. The session had been draining, but he also felt like he had gained something valuable, a better understanding of his own mind and emotions. The Victor was waiting for him in the lobby, flipping through a magazine. He looked up as Lucas approached, his face brightening. "Hey kiddo, how'd it go?" Lucas shrugged, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. "It was okay. Dr. Chen taught me some breathing exercises to try when I feel panicky." "That's great, Lucas," Victor said, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "I'm really proud of you for sticking with this. I know it's not easy." As they walked to the car, Lucas felt a surge of gratitude for Victor. The man had been unwavering in his support, never pushing too hard, but always there when Lucas needed him. "Hey, Victor," Lucas said as they buckled their seatbelts. "Thanks for everything." Victor's eyes misted slightly, but he quickly blinked it away. "Any time, kiddo. That's what family is for." The word family hung in the air between them, warm and comforting. Lucas let it wash over him, a balm to the wounds of his past. That night, as Lucas lay in bed, his mind drifted back to the techniques Dr. Chen had taught him. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breath, in for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. As he repeated the pattern, he felt the tension in his body slowly begin to unwind. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, a loud crash of thunder shook the windows. Lucas's eyes flew open, his heart racing. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. But then he remembered Dr. Chen's words, "You have the tools. You can handle this." Taking a deep breath, Lucas began to use the grounding technique they had practiced. He focused on 5 things he could see in the dim light of his room: the glow in the dark stars on his ceiling, the outline of his desk, the shadow of his bookshelf. 4 things he could touch: the soft fabric of his sheets, the coolness of his pillow, the smooth surface of his nightstand. 3 things he could hear: the patter of rain against the window, the distant rumble of thunder, the quiet hum of the air conditioning. As he continued through the exercise, Lucas felt his heartbeat slow, the panic receding like a tide going out. He was safe. He was in his room in Victor's apartment. The storm outside couldn't hurt him. With a small sense of triumph, Lucas rolled over and closed his eyes. He had faced his fear and come out the other side. It was a small victory, but an important one. The next few weeks saw Lucas continuing to make progress both in therapy and in his daily life. And he still had moments of anxiety and fear, but the coping techniques Dr. Chen had taught him helped immensely. And he found himself better able to manage his reactions to sudden noises or unexpected situations. At school, his friendship with Emma continued to grow. She seemed to have an innate understanding of when Lucas needed space and when he needed support. Their history presentation on Harriet Tubman was a resounding success, earning them top marks and praise from Mrs. Thompson. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Victor surprised Lucas with a trip to the local animal shelter. "I thought we might look into getting a furry friend," he explained as they walked through the doors. Dr. Chen mentioned that pets can be really helpful for people dealing with anxiety and trauma. Lucas felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as they walked past the kennels. Barks and meows filled the air, along with the occasional squawk from the small animal section. As they turned a corner, Lucas's eyes fell on a small, scruffy-looking dog with one ear that flopped over, while the other stood straight up. The dog looked up at them, its tail giving a hesitant wag. There was something in its eyes that Lucas recognized, a wariness, a hint of fear, but also a glimmer of hope. Can we look at that one?" Lucas asked, pointing to the scruffy dog. The shelter volunteer smiled, opening the kennel door. "This is Max," she explained as the dog cautiously approached them. "He was rescued from a pretty bad situation, so he's a bit shy. But he's got a heart of gold." Lucas crouched down, holding out his hand for Max to sniff. The dog hesitated for a moment before inching forward, his cold nose touching Lucas's fingers. Then, to everyone's surprise, Max let out a small whine and pressed his head against Lucas's hand. "Well, would you look at that?" Victor said softly. "I think he likes you, kiddo." Lucas felt a lump form in his throat as he gently stroked Max's fur. This dog understood what it was like to be afraid, to have your trust broken. But here he was, taking a chance on Lucas. "Can we adopt him?" Lucas asked, looking up at Victor with pleading eyes. Victor's face broke into a wide grin. "I think that's a great idea." The process of adopting Max and bringing him home was a whirlwind of excitement and preparation. Victor and Lucas spent the next week puppy-proofing the apartment, buying supplies, and reading up on dog care. When the day finally came to bring Max home, Lucas felt a nervous excitement bubbling in his chest. As they entered the apartment, Max looked around curiously, his tail giving tentative wags. Lucas crouched down beside him, speaking in a soft, reassuring voice. "It's okay, Max," he said. "This is your home now. You're safe here." As the words left his mouth, Lucas realized he wasn't just talking to the dog. He was speaking to himself as well. This apartment, this life with Victor, was his home too. A place where he was safe, where he could heal and grow. That night, as Lucas lay in bed with Max curled up at his feet, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, he knew. There would still be nightmares, still be moments of fear and doubt. But he wasn't facing them alone anymore. He had Victor, steady and supportive. He had Emma and his other friends at school. He had Dr. Chen, guiding him through the process of healing. And now he had Max, a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to overcome a difficult past. As he drifted off to sleep, Lucas's last thought was one of quiet determination. Tomorrow was a new day, another chance to grow stronger, to build the life he deserved. And he was ready to face it, one step at a time. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the living room as Victor pored over a stack of legal documents. His brow furrowed in concentration, occasionally jotting notes in the margins. Across the room, Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor, Max curled up beside him as he worked on his homework. The comfortable silence was broken by the sound of Victor's phone buzzing. He answered it, his voice low and serious as he listened to the person on the other end. Lucas tried to focus on his math problems, but he couldn't help stealing glances at Victor, noting the way his guardian's expression tightened. Finally, Victor ended the call with a heavy sigh. He looked over at Lucas, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "Lucas," he said gently, "can we talk for a minute?" Anxiety bubbled up in Lucas's chest, but he nodded, setting aside his textbook and moving to sit on the couch. Max, sensing the shift in mood, followed and rested his head on Lucas's lap. Victor sat down beside them, running a hand through his hair. "That was Elena, my lawyer," he began. "She's been doing some digging into your background, trying to make sure we have all the information we need for the adoption process." Lucas's heart began to race. Was something wrong? Had they found a reason he couldn't stay with Victor? Seeing the panic in Lucas's eyes, Victor quickly continued, "Don't worry, kiddo. You're not going anywhere. But Elena found some information about your biological father." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He hadn't allowed himself to think about his father in months, pushing away the memories of that terrible night whenever they threatened to surface. Now, hearing Victor mention him, it all came rushing back: the cold water, the receding lights of the boat, the crushing sense of betrayal. Victor placed a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder, grounding him. "Take a deep breath, Lucas. You're safe here, remember." Lucas nodded, focusing on his breathing the way Dr. Chen had taught him. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Slowly, the roaring in his ears subsided. What did Elena find?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victor's expression was a mixture of sadness and carefully controlled anger. "It seems your father has a history of mental health issues. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder several years ago, but stopped taking his medication around the time of what happened to you." Lucas blinked, trying to process this information. His father was sick. How was he supposed to feel about that? "There's more," Victor continued softly. "Your father was arrested last week. He was causing a disturbance, claiming he had to find his son and make things right. He's currently in a psychiatric facility for evaluation." A storm of emotions raged through Lucas: anger, fear, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite name. Does he know where I am?" he asked, hating how small his voice sounded. Victor shook his head firmly. "No, he doesn't, and he won't. Elena and I are doing everything we can to make sure you're protected. But Lucas, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me, okay?" Lucas nodded, bracing himself. "If your father completes treatment and is deemed mentally stable, would you want to have any contact with him? You don't have to decide now, and whatever you choose, I'll support you. But it's something we need to think about." The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Lucas felt as if he was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to step back to safety or leap into the unknown. I don't know," he said finally, his voice shaking. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Victor said, pulling Lucas into a gentle hug. "Take all the time you need. And remember, whatever you decide, you're not alone in this." That night, sleep eluded Lucas. He tossed and turned, his mind a whirlwind of memories and questions. Max, sensing his distress, snuggled closer, offering silent comfort. As the first light of dawn crept through his window, Lucas made a decision. He needed to know more. Not just about his father's illness, but about mental health in general. Understanding, he realized, might be the key to making sense of his tumultuous past. Over the next few weeks, Lucas threw himself into research. He checked out books from the library, scoured reputable websites, and even asked Dr. Ken for resources on bipolar disorder and its effects on families. Victor, seeing Lucas's determination, arranged for them to attend a support group for families affected by mental illness. It was at one of these meetings that Lucas met Sarah, a woman in her 30s whose mother had bipolar disorder. After the meeting, as people mingled over coffee and cookies, Sarah approached Lucas. "First time here?" she asked kindly. Lucas nodded, fidgeting with his empty paper cup. "Yeah, I'm trying to understand some things about my dad." Sarah's eyes softened with understanding. "It's not easy, is it? Loving someone with a mental illness, especially when they've hurt you." Did your mom ever do anything really bad?" Lucas asked hesitantly. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "When I was about your age, my mom had a severe manic episode. She believed she could fly and tried to jump off our roof. I had to talk her down. It was terrifying." Lucas's eyes widened. "What happened after that?" It was a wake-up call for our family, Sarah explained. Mum got the help she needed, started taking her medication consistently, and things got better. It wasn't perfect, and there were still hard times, but we learned to manage. As Lucas listened to Sarah's story, he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't expected: hope. Not that everything would magically be okay, but that there was a path forward, a way to make sense of the chaos. How did you forgive her?" Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's expression was thoughtful. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. I had to learn to separate my mom from her illness, to understand that the person who hurt me wasn't the real her. But more than that, I had to decide that forgiveness was something I needed for myself, not just for her. Her words stuck with Lucas long after the meeting ended. On the drive home, he was unusually quiet, mulling over everything he'd learned. "Penny for your thoughts, kiddo," Victor asked, glancing over at him. Lucas took a deep breath. I think I want to write a letter to my dad." Victor's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he kept his voice calm. "Okay, do you want to send it to him?" "No," Lucas said, shaking his head. "At least not yet. I just need to get my thoughts out, you know." Dr. Chen said writing can be a good way to process feelings. Victor nodded, a proud smile tugging at his lips. "I think that's a great idea, Lucas. And if you want me to read it when you're done, or if you just want to talk about it, I'm here." That night, Lucas sat at his desk, a blank piece of paper before him. Max lay at his feet, a comforting presence as Lucas grappled with the swirling emotions inside him. Taking a deep breath, he began to write. "Dear Dad, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say these things, even if it's just for myself. What you did to me that night was wrong. It was cruel, and it hurt me in ways I'm still trying to understand. For a long time, I was angry. I was scared. I thought I must have done something to make you stop loving me. But now I know that's not true. I know you're sick, that you weren't thinking clearly when you took me on that boat. It doesn't make what you did okay, but it helps me understand a little bit. I'm safe now. I have a new family, people who love me and take care of me. I'm learning how to trust again, how to be happy. Some days are still hard, but I'm getting stronger. I don't know if I can ever forgive you completely. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again. But I hope you're getting the help you need. I hope you're taking your medication and working with doctors to get better. Maybe someday when we're both ready we can talk. But for now, I need to focus on healing myself. I need to learn how to be okay without you. I hope you understand. Lucas." As he wrote the final words, Lucas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The letter wasn't perfect, and it didn't solve everything, but it was a start. It was a way of acknowledging his pain while also recognizing the complexity of the situation. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. Maybe someday he'd be ready to send it, or to say these things to his father in person. But for now, this was enough. The next day, Lucas shared the letter with Dr. Chen during their therapy session. As she read it, her eyes filled with pride and compassion. "This is incredibly mature, Lucas," she said, handing the letter back to him. "You've shown a lot of growth and insight here. How do you feel after writing it?" Lucas considered the question. "Lighter, I guess. Like I'm not carrying all that anger and confusion around anymore. But also, I don't know, kind of sad." Dr. Chen nodded understanding. "That's very normal, Lucas. You're grieving the relationship you should have had with your father, the childhood you lost. It's okay to feel sad about that, even as you move forward." As the session continued, they discussed strategies for continuing to process these complex emotions. Dr. Chen suggested journaling as a regular practice, as well as exploring art therapy as another outlet for expression. When Lucas left the office that day, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He was facing his past head-on, no longer running from the difficult emotions but learning to understand and manage them. That evening, as Lucas and Victor walked Max in the nearby park, Lucas found himself opening up about the letter and his session with Dr. Chen. "I'm really proud of you, kiddo," Victor said, his voice warm with affection. "I know none of this has been easy, but you're handling it with so much courage and maturity." Lucas felt a warmth spread through his chest at Victor's words. For so long he had felt broken, damaged by what had happened to him. But now he was starting to see himself differently. He was a survivor, someone who had been through something terrible but was finding a way to thrive despite it. As they watched Max chase a butterfly through the grass, Lucas turned to Victor. "Hey, Victor, I've been thinking about the adoption. I think I'm ready. If you still want to, I mean." Victor's eyes welled with tears, a broad smile spreading across his face. "Lucas, nothing would make me happier. You're already my son in every way that matters. Making it official would be a dream come true." In that moment, standing in the fading sunlight with his dog at his feet, and his soon-to-be official father by his side, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead might still have its challenges, but he was no longer facing them alone. He had a family, he had support, and most importantly, he had hope for the future. As they turned to head home, Lucas realized that while he couldn't change his past, he had the power to shape his future. And for the first time in a long time, he was excited to see what that future might hold. The soft glow of the laptop screen illuminated Lucas's face as he sat at his desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He had been staring at the blank document for what felt like hours, trying to find the right words to begin his story. Max lay at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to give Lucas an encouraging nudge. It had been 2 years since that fateful night when Victor had rescued him from the sea. 2 years of therapy, healing, and slowly rebuilding his life. Now, at 15, Lucas felt ready to share his story with the world. He took a deep breath and began to type. "The sea has always been a part of me. It was my playground, my solace, and then, for one terrible night, it almost became my grave. This is the story of how I survived, how I found a new family, and how I learned to swim through the storms of life." The words flowed more easily after that, as if a dam had broken. Lucas wrote about the betrayal, the terror of that night in the ocean, and the miraculous rescue. He wrote about Victor, the man who became more than just a savior, he became a father. He wrote about the struggles of adjusting to his new life, the nightmares that plagued him, and the slow, sometimes painful process of healing. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow through his bedroom window, Lucas finally sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. He had done it. The first draft of his memoir was complete. A soft knock at the door startled him from his reverie. Victor poked his head in, a concerned look on his face. "Have you been up all night, kiddo?" Lucas nodded, a mixture of sheepishness and pride on his face. "I finished it, Dad. The first draft, at least." Victor's face broke into a wide smile. He had officially adopted Lucas a year ago, and hearing him say Dad still filled his heart with joy. "That's incredible, Lucas. I'm so proud of you. How do you feel?" Lucas considered the question for a moment. "Tired," he admitted with a small laugh. "But also lighter, like I finally let out something that's been building up inside me for years." Victor nodded, understanding. "Writing can be incredibly cathartic. But remember what Dr. Chen said, it's okay if this brings up some difficult emotions. And we're here for you every step of the way." Over the next few months, Lucas worked tirelessly on his book. He revised and edited, poring over every word to make sure he was telling his story as honestly and authentically as possible. Victor connected him with a professional editor who specialized in memoirs, and together they polished the manuscript until it shone. The day the first printed copies arrived at their apartment was a mix of excitement and nerves. Lucas held the book in his hands, tracing his fingers over the cover. His own face looked back at him, alongside the title, "Surviving the Storm, A Journey of Healing and Hope." "It's really happening," he murmured, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Victor squeezed his shoulder gently. "It sure is, kiddo. You should be incredibly proud of yourself." As the release date approached, Lucas found himself thrust into a whirlwind of activity. There were interviews to give, a book tour to plan, and speaking engagements at schools and youth organizations. It was overwhelming at times, but Lucas was determined to use his story to help others who might be struggling. The night before his first major television interview, Lucas couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind racing with all the things he wanted to say, all the ways the interview could go wrong. Finally, giving up on sleep, he padded out to the living room. To his surprise, Victor was already there, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" he said, patting the spot next to him. Lucas shook his head, curling up on the couch. "What if I freeze up? What if I say the wrong thing?" Victor wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. "You're going to do great, Lucas. Just speak from your heart, like you did in your book. Your story has the power to help so many people." As they sat there in the quiet of the night, Lucas felt his anxiety begin to ebb. He had faced far worse than a television interview. He had survived abandonment, near death, and the long, difficult road of healing. He could handle this. The interview, as it turned out, went better than Lucas could have imagined. The host was kind and respectful, asking thoughtful questions that allowed Lucas to share his story in a meaningful way. As he spoke about his experiences, he could see the impact his words were having on the studio audience. There were tears, nods of understanding, and moments of profound silence. "And your book doesn't just tell the story of your survival," the host said towards the end of the interview. "It also talks a lot about forgiveness and understanding. Can you tell us a bit about that?" Lucas took a deep breath, centering himself before answering. "Forgiveness has been one of the hardest parts of my journey," he began. "For a long time I was so angry at my father, so hurt by what he had done. But as I learned more about mental illness and started to heal myself, I began to understand that forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'm still working on forgiveness every day. It's a process, not a destination. But I've learned that it's possible to acknowledge the hurt someone has caused you while also having compassion for their struggles. Well, my father was sick, and while that doesn't make what he did okay, it helps me understand it a little." The host nodded, visibly moved. "That's an incredibly mature perspective, especially for someone so young. One last question. What message do you hope readers take away from your book?" Lucas smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. "I hope they take away the message that no matter how dark things seem, there's always hope. That it's okay to ask for help, to lean on others when you're struggling, and most importantly, that your past doesn't have to define your future. You can survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side." As the interview ended and the audience applauded, Lucas felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. He had faced one of his biggest fears, speaking publicly about his trauma, and had come through it stronger. In the weeks that followed, Lucas's book became a sensation. It resonated with people of all ages, from teenagers struggling with their own traumas to adults grappling with forgiveness and healing. Lucas received countless letters and messages from readers, sharing how his story had impacted them, how it had given them hope in their own dark times. One afternoon, as Lucas was signing books at a local bookstore, a young girl approached his table. She couldn't have been more than 12, and her hands shook slightly as she placed his book in front of him. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes brimming with tears. "Your book, it made me feel less alone." Lucas felt his heart swell with emotion. This, he realized, was why he had written the book. Not for fame or recognition, but for moments like these, moments where his words could reach out and touch someone who was hurting, offering a lifeline of hope. As he signed the girl's book, adding a personal message of encouragement, Lucas reflected on how far he had come. From a terrified boy fighting for survival in the cold, dark ocean, to a young man using his voice to help others navigate their own storms. That evening, as he and Victor walked Max along the beach near their home, Lucas paused to look out at the sea. The waves that had once nearly claimed his life now lapped gently at the shore, a reminder of the peace he had found. "You okay, kiddo?" Victor asked, noticing Lucas's contemplative mood. Lucas nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking about everything that's happened. How different things could have been." Victor wrapped an arm around Lucas's shoulders. "I'm so proud of you, you know that? Not just for the book, but for everything. Your strength, your compassion, your willingness to be vulnerable to help others. You're an incredible young man, Lucas." Lucas leaned into the embrace, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the setting sun. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Delph. You saved me in more ways than one." As they stood there watching the sun sink into the horizon, Lucas felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. For Victor, for Max, for Dr. Chen, and all the others who had helped him on his journey. For the second chance at life he had been given. He knew there would still be challenges ahead. Healing was an ongoing process, and there would always be days when the memories of that terrible night threatened to overwhelm him. But he also knew that he had the strength to face whatever storms life might bring. Lucas took a deep breath, inhaling the salty sea air. The ocean that had once been a source of terror now filled him with a sense of peace and possibility. He was no longer just surviving, he was thriving, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. As they turned to head home, Lucas cast one last look at the sea. "Thank you," he whispered, not sure if he was speaking to the ocean, to fate, or to something larger than both. Then, with a lightness in his step, he walked alongside Victor, ready to write the next chapter of his story. The bustling courthouse corridor was a stark contrast to the tranquil life Lucas had grown accustomed to over the past few years. The click of heels on polished floors, the murmur of hushed conversations, and the occasional burst of a ringing phone created a cacophony that set his nerves on edge. Victor's steady presence beside him was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Are you ready for this, kiddo?" Victor asked, his voice low and reassuring. Lucas took a deep breath, straightening his tie. At 17, he looked older than his years, the weight of his experiences evident in his eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. They were here for the final hearing in the case against Lucas's biological father, David. The past year had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, psychiatric evaluations and emotional upheavals. And now finally it was coming to an end. As they entered the courtroom, Lucas's eyes were immediately drawn to the man sitting at the defendant's table. David looked smaller than Lucas remembered, his shoulders hunched and his once imposing frame diminished by time and circumstance. When their eyes met, Lucas felt a jolt of something. Not quite fear, not quite anger, but a complex mixture of emotions he couldn't quite name. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and formalities. Lucas listened with half an ear, his mind drifting back to the day he had made the decision to pursue legal action. It had been shortly after his book was published. The success of Surviving the Storm had brought Lucas's story into the public eye, and with it came renewed interest in the case. Journalists had dug up details about David's arrest and subsequent treatment, and suddenly Lucas found himself faced with a choice he never thought he'd have to make. "You don't have to do this," Victor had said when Lucas first broached the subject of pressing charges. "No one would blame you if you wanted to leave the past in the past." But Lucas had shaken his head, a determined set to his jaw. "I need to do this," he'd said, "not just for me, but for other kids who might be in similar situations. If my story can help change how the system handles cases like mine, then it's worth it." Now, sitting in the courtroom, Lucas wondered if he had made the right choice. The legal battle had been grueling, forcing him to relive moments he'd rather forget, and exposing his pain to public scrutiny. But as he listened to the prosecutor detailing the charges, attempted murder, child endangerment, abandonment, he felt a sense of validation. What had happened to him was wrong, and now, finally, there would be accountability. The defense calls Lucas Armstrong to the stand. The sound of his name, his new name, the one he had chosen when Victor adopted him, snapped Lucas back to the present. With a reassuring nod from Victor, he made his way to the witness stand. As he was sworn in, Lucas caught sight of his father again. David was watching him intently, an unreadable expression on his face. For a moment, Lucas was transported back to that night on the boat, the cold wind whipping around him, his father's emotionless face the last thing he saw before hitting the water. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and centered himself the way Dr. Chen had taught him. The defense attorney approached, her expression carefully neutral. "Lucas, can you tell the court about your relationship with your father before the incident?" Lucas swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. "It was complicated," he began. "After my mom died, things changed. My dad started drinking more, became more distant. But there were still good moments. He taught me how to fish, how to change a tire. He wasn't all bad, not then." "And on the night in question, did your father seem different to you? Agitated, perhaps, or not himself?" Lucas considered the question carefully. He was quiet, more so than usual, but I didn't think much of it at the time. "I never imagined he would," his voice trailed off, the memory still too painful to articulate fully. The questioning continued, a delicate dance of legal strategy and raw emotion. Lucas answered each question as honestly as he could, fighting to keep his voice steady. He spoke about the terror of that night, the long journey of healing, and the complex process of understanding and forgiving. "Lucas," the defense attorney said, her voice softening slightly, "you've spoken and written about forgiveness in relation to your father. Can you elaborate on that for the court?" Lucas took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened," he said slowly. "For me, it's been about understanding, learning about my father's mental illness, about the factors that led to that night. It's helped me see the bigger picture. I'm still angry sometimes, still hurt, but I've also learned that holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting him." As he spoke, Lucas noticed a change in his father's demeanor. David's shoulders had begun to shake, silent tears streaming down his face. It was the first real emotion Lucas had seen from him since the trial began. When it was the prosecution's turn to question him, Lucas steeled himself. Their questions were more pointed, designed to highlight the severity of David's actions and their impact on Lucas's life. As he recounted the details of that night and its aftermath, Lucas felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were talking about someone else's life. Finally, after what felt like hours, Lucas was allowed to step down from the witness stand. As he made his way back to his seat beside Victor, he felt drained but oddly liberated. He had told his truth, faced his past head-on, and come out the other side. The rest of the trial passed in a blur. Expert witnesses testified about David's mental state, both at the time of the incident and now. Character witnesses spoke about the man David had been before his illness took hold. Through it all, Lucas watched and listened, trying to reconcile the man he saw in the courtroom with the father he remembered. When it came time for David to take the stand, Lucas found himself holding his breath. This was the moment he had both dreaded and longed for, to hear, in his father's own words, an explanation for that terrible night. David's voice was rough with emotion as he began to speak. "I can't undo what I did," he said, his eyes fixed on Lucas. "I can't take away the pain I caused my son. All I can do is try to explain and to ask for forgiveness that I know I don't deserve." He went on to detail his struggle with bipolar disorder, the spiral that had led to that fateful night, and the years of treatment and therapy that had followed. "I was sick," he said, "but that's not an excuse. It's an explanation, but it doesn't justify what I did." "Lucas," he said, turning to face his son directly, "I am so sorry. You deserved better than what I gave you." Lucas felt tears pricking at his eyes, a lump forming in his throat. He had imagined this moment so many times, had rehearsed what he would say or do. But now, faced with his father's raw emotion and genuine remorse, he found himself at a loss. As the trial drew to a close, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jury filed out to deliberate, leaving Lucas, Victor, and the rest of the attendees to wait in anxious silence. Lucas found himself unable to sit still, pacing the corridor outside the courtroom. "Whatever happens in there," Victor said, placing a comforting hand on Lucas's shoulder, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've shown incredible strength and maturity throughout this whole process." Lucas managed a small smile. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." The wait seemed interminable, but finally, after several hours, word came that the jury had reached a verdict. As they filed back into the courtroom, Lucas felt his heart pounding in his chest. The judge's voice rang out clear and firm as she read the verdict. David was found guilty of attempted murder and child endangerment, but with a recommendation for continued psychiatric treatment rather than traditional incarceration. The sentence, 5 years in a secure mental health facility, followed by intensive outpatient treatment and monitoring. As the judge detailed the terms of the sentence, Lucas felt a complex mix of emotions wafting him. Relief that justice had been served, sadness for the years lost, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps with proper treatment, his father could find a path to redemption. After the court was adjourned, Lucas found himself face to face with his father for the first time in years. David, flanked by guards, looked at Lucas with eyes full of regret and something else, pride. "Lucas," he said softly, "I know I have no right to ask this of you, but do you think someday we might be able to talk? Really talk?" Lucas took a deep breath, considering his words carefully. "I can't make any promises," he said finally. "But maybe someday when we've both had more time to heal, maybe we can try." David nodded, understanding and gratitude evident in his expression. As he was led away, Lucas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step towards something like peace. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters waited, eager for a statement from the young author whose story had captivated the nation. Lucas, with Victor's steadying presence beside him, stepped up to the microphones. "Today's verdict doesn't erase what happened," he began, his voice strong and clear. "But it does offer a path forward, for me, for my father, and hopefully for others who might find themselves in similar situations. Mental illness is complex, and its impacts ripple out far beyond the individual. My hope is that my story and this trial can help spark conversations about how we as a society handle these difficult intersections of mental health and criminal justice." As he fielded questions from the press, Lucas felt a sense of purpose settle over him. His journey, which had begun in terror and pain, had led him to this moment, using his voice to advocate for change, to offer hope to others who might be struggling. Later that evening, as Lucas and Victor walked Max along the beach, a ritual that had become a source of comfort and reflection for both of them, Lucas paused to look out at the ocean. The waves that had once nearly claimed his life now lapped gently at the shore, a reminder of how far he had come. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I used to think my story was just about survival. But now I see it's about so much more. It's about healing, about finding family in unexpected places, about the power of understanding and forgiveness." Victor nodded, a proud smile on his face. "You've turned your pain into purpose, kiddo. That's a rare and beautiful thing." As they stood there, watching the sun sink into the horizon, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be more challenges to face, more healing to do. But he was no longer the scared, broken boy who had been pulled from the sea years ago. He was stronger now, wiser, and surrounded by love. So with a contented sigh, Lucas turned away from the ocean and towards home, towards his future. The storm had passed, and though its effects would always be part of him, he was ready to embrace whatever calm or new adventures lay ahead. The gentle hum of conversation filled the auditorium as Lucas stood backstage, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. It had been 5 years since the trial, 5 years of growth, healing, and unexpected turns. Now at 22, he was about to step onto the stage of a prestigious university to deliver a keynote on mental health awareness and the power of resilience. As he peeked through the curtains at the sea of faces, Lucas couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought him here. Each person in that audience had their own story, their own struggles and triumphs. He hoped his words would resonate, would offer a glimmer of hope to those who needed it most. Taking a deep breath, Lucas straightened his tie, a gift from Victor for his college graduation just a few months earlier. The memory of that day, of the pride shining in Victor's eyes as Lucas accepted his diploma, gave him strength. With one last glance at the note cards in his hand, Lucas stepped out onto the stage. The applause that greeted him was warm and encouraging. As it died down, Lucas looked out at the audience, making eye contact with a few individuals. In their eyes he saw curiosity, empathy, and something else, a hunger for understanding, for connection. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for being here tonight. By showing up, by being willing to engage with difficult topics, you're already taking a crucial step towards creating a more compassionate and understanding world." As Lucas launched into his speech, weaving together personal anecdotes with statistics and calls to action, he could feel the energy in the room shift. When he spoke about the night his father had tried to drown him, a collective gasp rippled through the audience. And when he described the long, often painful process of healing and forgiveness, he saw heads nodding in recognition. "Mental illness doesn't just affect the individual," Lucas said, his voice passionate. "It ripples out, touching families, friends, entire communities. My father's untreated bipolar disorder nearly cost me my life, but it also robbed him of years with his son, of the chance to watch me grow up." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. In the silence he could almost feel the audience holding its breath, their hearts beating in sync with his own. "But this isn't just a story of loss," he continued, a small smile playing at his lips. "It's also a story of hope, of second chances, and of the incredible resilience of the human spirit." As Lucas spoke about Victor, about the unexpected family he had found in the aftermath of tragedy, he saw eyes glistening with unshed tears. He felt a lump form in his own throat, the emotions of the moment threatening to overwhelm him. "Sometimes," he said softly, "our greatest blessings come disguised as our worst nightmares. The night I thought my life was ending was actually the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, support, and the kind of understanding I never thought possible." Throughout the auditorium, people leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every word. Lucas could see the impact his story was having, the way it was opening hearts and minds, challenging preconceptions about mental illness and family dynamics. As he neared the end of his speech, Lucas decided to deviate from his prepared remarks. Something about the energy in the room, the connection he felt with the audience, inspired him to speak from the heart. "I see a lot of pain in this room," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I see struggle and fear and maybe even a bit of hopelessness. I want you to know that I see you, that your pain is valid and that you are not alone." A quiet sob from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium punctuated his words. Lucas paused, allowing the moment to breathe, to resonate. "But I also see strength," he continued. "I see resilience and courage and an incredible capacity for love and forgiveness. Each one of you has the power to write your own story, to choose how you respond to the challenges life throws your way." As Lucas delivered his closing remarks, calling for greater mental health resources and a more compassionate approach to those struggling with mental illness, he felt a sense of purpose wash over him. This was why he had written his book, why he had pursued a degree in psychology, why he continued to share his story despite the emotional toll it sometimes took. The applause that erupted as he finished speaking was thunderous. As Lucas looked out at the standing ovation, he saw faces streaked with tears, eyes shining with renewed hope and determination. He had connected with them, had touched something deep within their souls. After the speech, as Lucas mingled with attendees during the reception, he was struck by the number of people who approached him to share their own stories. A young woman with haunted eyes told him about her brother's struggle with schizophrenia. An older gentleman, his hand shaking slightly, spoke of his own journey with bipolar disorder and the family he had lost along the way. Each story, each connection, reinforced Lucas's belief in the power of openness and vulnerability. By sharing our struggles, by shining a light on the darker corners of human experience, we create space for healing and understanding. As the evening wound down, Lucas found a quiet moment to slip outside. The cool night air was a relief after the emotional intensity of the auditorium. As he gazed up at the stars, he felt a presence beside him. It was Victor, who had flown in to support him for this important night. "Oh, you did good in there, kiddo," Victor said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Really good." Lucas leaned into his father's embrace, feeling the same sense of safety and love that had helped him heal all those years ago. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done any of this without you." As they stood there in comfortable silence, Lucas reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The scared, broken boy who had been pulled from the sea seemed like a distant memory. In his place stood a young man with purpose, with a voice that could make a difference in the world. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be more challenges to face, more stories to tell, more minds and hearts to open. But Lucas knew he was ready for whatever came next. He had survived the storm, had learned to navigate the choppy waters of life with grace and resilience. As he and Victor walked back inside to join the lingering guests, Lucas felt a surge of gratitude for everyone and everything that had shaped his journey. The pain, the love, the struggles, and the triumphs, all of it had led into this moment of connection and purpose. And as he looked out at the faces of those who had stayed to talk, to share, to find hope in his words, Lucas knew that his story was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. Dear readers, as we come to the end of this chapter in Lucas's life, I can't help but wonder, how has his journey resonated with you? Have you ever found strength in unexpected places or discovered a silver lining in your darkest moments? Lucas's story reminds us that even in our most challenging times, there is hope for healing and growth. Perhaps you faced your own storms or supported a loved one through theirs. Maybe you've grappled with forgiveness or struggled to understand the complexities of mental health. Whatever your experience, know that your story matters too. As we reflect on Lucas's transformation from a frightened boy to a compassionate advocate, let's consider how we can bring more understanding and empathy into our own lives and communities. What small step could you take today to support mental health awareness or to reach out to someone who might be struggling? Remember, every act of kindness, every moment of vulnerability, and every effort to understand can create ripples of change. Just as Lucas found his voice and used it to touch countless lives, you too have the power to make a difference. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Your engagement, your empathy, and your willingness to explore these complex issues alongside Lucas make stories like this possible. Together we can continue to break down stigmas, build bridges of understanding, and create a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and supported. What part of Lucas's story touched you the most? How has it inspired you to view your own challenges differently? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your story could be the light someone else needs to find their way through the storm. The sun was setting over the city skyline as Lucas stood on the balcony of his apartment, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. At 25, he had accomplished more than he ever thought possible. His second book, Beyond the Storm: Building Resilience in the Face of Adversity, had just hit the bestseller list, and his work as a mental health advocate had taken him around the world. Tonight, his mind was focused on a more personal matter. Tomorrow, he would be meeting his biological father, David, for the first time since the trial. The decision hadn't come easily. It had taken years of therapy, countless conversations with Victor, and deep soul searching to reach this point. As if summoned by his thoughts, Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "You okay, kiddo? Remember, I'm here if you need me." Lucas smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. No matter how old he got, Victor's unwavering support never failed to comfort him. He typed back a quick reply, "I'm good, Dad, just a little nervous. Thanks for always having my back." Turning back to the cityscape before him, Lucas reflected on the journey that had led him to this moment as a moment. The years following the trial had been filled with growth and challenges. He had thrown himself into his studies, graduating at the top of his class with a degree in psychology. His work with various mental health organizations had opened his eyes to the widespread impact of untreated mental illness, strengthening his resolve to make a difference. But even as he built a life he was proud of, the unresolved questions about his past lingered. What had become of his father? Had the treatment helped? Could there ever be a way forward for them? The decision to reach out had come gradually. It started with updates from David's doctors, passed along through his lawyer. Reports of progress, of medication compliance, of genuine remorse and a desire to make amends. Then came the letters, hesitant at first, full of apologies and explanations, but eventually evolving into real communication. Lucas had been wary, of course. The memory of that terrible night still haunted him occasionally. But as he read his father's words, he began to see glimpses of the man he remembered from his early childhood, before the illness had taken hold, before their world had shattered. A soft whine drew Lucas from his reverie. Max, now an elderly dog with a greying muzzle, nudged his hand gently. Lucas scratched behind the dog's ears, grateful for the grounding presence of his longtime companion. "What do you think, boy?" he murmured. "Am I doing the right thing?" Max's tail thumped against the floor, his dark eyes full of unconditional love. Lucas chuckled softly. "Yeah, I think so too." As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Lucas made his way back inside. He had an early morning ahead of him, and he wanted to be well rested for the emotional day to come. The cafe was quiet when Lucas arrived the next morning, just a few early risers sipping their coffees and tapping away on laptops. He chose a table near the back, positioning himself so he could see the door. His hands shook slightly as he arranged and rearranged the sugar packets on the table, a nervous habit he thought he'd outgrown. The bell above the door chimed and Lucas's head snapped up. There, looking older and more fragile than he remembered, stood David. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. David approached slowly, as if afraid Lucas might bolt at any sudden movement. "Lucas," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Lucas nodded, gesturing to the chair across from him. As David sat down, Lucas took a moment to really look at his father. The years hadn't been kind, there were new lines etched into his face, and his hair had gone completely grey. But his eyes were clear, present in a way Lucas didn't remember from his later childhood. "You look good," David said, breaking the awkward silence. "I've been following your work, your books. I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. Pride. It was something he had always craved from his father, something he had given up hoping for long ago. Now hearing it, he wasn't sure how to respond. "Thank you," he managed finally. "It hasn't been an easy road, but I'm grateful for where it's led me." They lapsed into silence again, both men sipping their coffees and gathering their thoughts. It was David who spoke first, his voice low and filled with regret. "Lucas, I know that nothing I can say will ever make up for what I did to you. I robbed you of your childhood, of your trust, of so much. If I could go back and change it, I would in a heartbeat. But since I can't, all I can do is tell you how deeply, truly sorry I am, and to thank you for giving me this chance to say it in person." Lucas felt tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. He had imagined this moment so many times, had rehearsed what he would say. But now, faced with his father's raw emotion and genuine remorse, he found himself at a loss for words. "I spent a long time hating you," Lucas said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "And then a long time trying not to feel anything at all. It's taken years of therapy and support to get to a place where I could even consider having this conversation." David nodded, pain etched across his features. "I understand. And I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you. If after today you decide you never want to see me again, I'll respect that. I I needed you to know how sorry I am and how much I love you despite everything." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of unspoken emotions. Lucas took a deep breath, centering himself the way Dr. Ken had taught him all those years ago. "I can't promise you anything," he said slowly. "I don't know if we can ever have a real relationship, or if I'll ever be able to fully forgive you. But I'm willing to try, to take it one day at a time and see where it leads." The relief and gratitude on David's face was palpable. "That's more than I deserve," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Lucas, truly." As they continued to talk, cautiously at first, but with growing ease, Lucas felt something shift inside him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step towards understanding, towards healing a wound that had been festering for far too long. When they finally parted ways with a tentative plan to meet again in a few weeks, Lucas felt lighter somehow. As if by facing this final demon from his past, he had freed himself from a burden he didn't even know he was carrying. Walking home through the bustling city streets, Lucas pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Victor answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad," Lucas said, a small smile playing at his lips. "Got time for a coffee? I could use someone to talk to." Victor's warm chuckle came through the line. "For you, kiddo, always. I'll meet you at our usual spot in 15. As Lucas navigated the crowded sidewalks, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead was still uncertain, the relationship with his biological father a fragile newborn thing. But he wasn't facing it alone. He had Victor, his rock and his true father, in every way that mattered. He had his friends, his work, and the strength he had built within himself. The storm that had nearly destroyed him as a child had also forged him into the man he was today, resilient, compassionate, and always striving to turn his pain into purpose. As he walked towards his meeting with Victor, Lucas felt ready for whatever the future might hold. He had weathered the worst of the storm, and now, finally, he was learning to dance in the rain. The warm summer breeze rustled through the leaves as Lucas stood at the entrance of the community center, a stack of flyers in his hands. At 30, he had become a well-known figure in the world of mental health advocacy, but today's event felt more personal than most. It was the grand opening of the Second Chance Center, a facility dedicated to supporting families affected by mental illness. Lucas took a deep breath, scanning the growing crowd. He spotted Victor chatting with some of the center's staff, his silver hair catching the sunlight. Nearby, Emma, Na's fiancée, was arranging refreshments, her smile bright as she greeted early arrivals. And there, standing slightly apart from the others, was David. The sight of his biological father still brought a complex mix of emotions, but the sharp pain of the past had dulled to a manageable ache. Over the past 5 years, they had slowly, cautiously rebuilt a relationship. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension and unresolved hurt, but it was something neither of them had thought possible in the dark days after the trial. As if sensing Lucas's gaze, David looked up. Their eyes met, and David offered a small, hesitant smile. Lucas nodded in acknowledgement, feeling a familiar tightness in his chest. He was glad David had come, even if his presence added extra layer of complexity to an already emotionally charged day. "You ready for this, kiddo?" Victor's voice broke through Lucas's thoughts as he approached, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. Lucas smiled, leaning into the touch. "As ready as I'll ever be. Thanks for being here, Dad." Victor's eyes crinkled with pride and love. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. This center, it's going to change lives, Lucas. You should be incredibly proud." As the clock struck noon, Lucas made his way to the small podium set up near the center's entrance. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning to him. He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling like that nervous teenager giving his first speech all over again. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "Thank you all for being here today to celebrate the opening of the Second Chance Center. This facility represents more than just bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of the power of understanding and support." As Lucas continued his speech, he found himself scanning the faces in the crowd. There were mental health professionals, community leaders, and donors who had helped make the center a reality. But more importantly, there were families, parents, children, siblings, all touched in some way by the impact of mental illness. I stand before you today not just as an advocate or an author, but as someone who has lived the reality of loving someone with mental illness, Lucas said, his voice softening. My journey began in trauma and fear, but it has led me to a place of understanding and purpose. He paused, his eyes meeting David's in the crowd. His father's face was a mask of emotion, pride, sorrow, and a deep, abiding love. So this center is dedicated to all those who are still in the midst of their storm, Lucas continued. To the children trying to understand a parent's illness, to the partners fighting to support their loved ones, to those struggling with their own mental health challenges. You are not alone. There is hope, there is help, and there is a future beyond the darkness. As Lucas concluded his speech and officially cut the ribbon to open the center, the crowd erupted in applause. People began to file inside, eager to tour the facility and learn about its programs. Lucas found himself swept up in a whirlwind of congratulations and well wishes. It was nearly an hour later when he finally found a moment of quiet, slipping away to a small garden area behind the center. There he sat on a bench, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. The magnitude of what they had accomplished was starting to sink in. "So mind if I join you?" Lucas opened his eyes to see David standing nearby, his posture uncertain. After a moment's hesitation, Lucas nodded, gesturing to the space beside him. They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the ongoing celebration drifting from the building. It was David who finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Lucas, what you've done here. It's incredible. I just wish..." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Lucas turned to look at his father, really look at him. The years of treatment and hard work were evident in David's clear eyes and steady demeanor, and he was a far cry from the man who had once driven them to that fateful night on the ocean. "I know, Dad," Lucas said softly, surprising himself with the use of the title. It was the first time he had called David Dad since that night. "I wish things had been different too, but we can't change the past. All we can do is try to create a better future." David nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness or any of this, but I'm grateful every day that you've allowed me to be a part of your life again." Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. "It hasn't been easy," he admitted. "There are still days when I struggle with what happened. But I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about choosing to let go of the anger and pain to make room for healing." They lapsed into silence again, but it was a comfortable one this time. As they sat there, Lucas realized how far they had both come. The scared boy and the troubled man from that night on the boat were gone, replaced by two individuals who had fought hard for their mental health and their relationship. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Victor and Emma, both wearing proud smiles. "There you are," Emma said, her eyes sparkling. "Everyone's asking for you inside. They want to hear more about the programs we'll be offering." Lucas stood, smoothing down his shirt. "Duty calls, I guess," he said with a small laugh. As they all turned to head back inside, Lucas felt a surge of emotion. Here, in this moment, were the pillars of his life. Victor, the father who had saved him and given him a second chance at family; Emma, his partner and strongest supporter; and David, a living testament to the possibility of change and redemption. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tours, discussions, and heartfelt conversations with families who would benefit from the center's services. By the time the last guest left and the staff began cleaning up, Lucas was exhausted but exhilarated. As he helped Emma pack up the leftover refreshments, he caught sight of Victor and David talking quietly in a corner. There was no tension in their postures, no awkwardness in their interaction, just two men bound by their love for the same person finding common ground. "Any for your thoughts?" Emma asked, following his gaze. Lucas smiled, pulling her close and pressing a kiss to her forehead. just thinking about how lucky I am, and how far we've all come." Soma leaned into him, her arms wrapping around his waist. "You've worked hard for this, Lucas. You've turned your pain into purpose, and you're helping so many people in the process." As they stood there, surveying the now quiet center, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had led him here, to a place where he could make a real difference, surrounded by love and support. Later that night, as Lucas lay in bed reflecting on the day, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from David. "Thank you for today, for everything. I know I can never make up for the past, but I promise to keep working every day to be worthy of the second chance you've given me. You're an incredible man, Lucas, and I'm honored to be your father." Lucas read the message several times, feeling the last piece of a long unsolved puzzle fall into place. He typed back a simple reply, "Thank you, Dad. Here's to new beginnings." As he set his phone aside and turned out the light, Lucas thought about the name of the center, Second Chance. It wasn't just about giving people another opportunity. It was about the courage to take that chance, to believe in the possibility of change and growth. He had taken the chance with David, with his career, with his own healing journey. And now, with the center, he was offering that same opportunity to countless others. The boy who had once been thrown into the sea had not only survived, he had learned to navigate the storms of life with grace and purpose. And in doing so, he had become a beacon of hope for others still fighting to stay afloat. As sleep began to claim him, Lucas smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And he was ready for all of it, buoyed by the love of his family, both chosen and reconciled, and the knowledge that even the darkest night eventually gives way to dawn. The Second Chance Center stood as a testament to that truth, a physical manifestation of hope in the face of adversity. And Lucas, once a victim of circumstance, now stood as living proof that with support, understanding and resilience, it was possible not just to survive the storm, but to emerge from it stronger, wiser and more compassionate than ever before. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Lucas stood at the podium, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. 5 years had passed since the opening of the Second Chance Center, and today marked another milestone in his journey. He was about to launch a nationwide mental health initiative, partnering with schools and community organizations to bring awareness and support to young people affected by family mental illness. As he looked out at the sea of faces before him, politicians, educators, mental health professionals, and families touched by his work, Lucas felt a profound sense of purpose. At 35, he had come so far from the frightened boy who had once been thrown into the ocean. Yet in many ways, that night had set him on the path that led to this very moment. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for being here today as we embark on this crucial initiative. Every child deserves to grow up in a safe, nurturing environment. But for those of us who have experienced the impact of mental illness in our families, we know that the reality is often far more complex." As Lucas spoke, he couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. The years of therapy, the struggle to trust again, the gradual process of rebuilding his relationship with David, all of it had shaped him into the advocate he was today. "This initiative isn't just about education or awareness," he continued, his passion evident in every word. "It's about breaking the cycle of silence and shame that too often surrounds mental illness. It's about giving children the tools to understand and cope with their experiences and providing families with the support they need to heal and thrive." From the corner of his eye, Lucas caught sight of Victor and Emma in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. Beside them sat David, older now, but with clear eyes and a gentle smile. The sight of his two fathers sitting together, united in their support, never failed to fill Lucas with a sense of wonder and gratitude. As he concluded his speech and the crowd erupted into applause, Lucas felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. This was why he did what he did, to create ripples of change that could transform lives. just as his own life had been transformed by the kindness and understanding of others. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of interviews, meetings, and heartfelt conversations with families eager to share their stories. By the time evening fell, Lucas was exhausted but exhilarated. As he packed up his materials, he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, son," David said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What you're doing, it's going to help so many people, so many families." Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. Even after all these years, moments like these with David still carried an emotional weight. "Thanks, Dad," he said softly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without our story." David nodded, understanding the complexity behind those words. Their journey of reconciliation hadn't been easy, but it had been crucial to his healing and his mission to help others. As they walked out of the conference center together, they were joined by Victor and Emma. The four of them made their way to a nearby restaurant, falling into easy conversation about the day's events and future plans for the initiative. Over dinner, Lucas found himself marveling at the family he had built: Victor, his adoptive father and unwavering support; Emma, his wife and partner in both life and work; and David, a living testament to the possibility of change and redemption. It was a family forged through adversity, bound together by love, understanding, and a shared commitment to making a difference. "You know," Emma said, reaching out to squeeze Lucas's hand, "I was thinking about the first time I met you, back in high school. If someone had told me then that we'd be here doing all of this, I'm not sure I would have believed them." Lucas smiled, remembering the shy, guarded boy he had been. "I'm not sure I would have believed it either," he admitted. "But that's the thing about life, isn't it? You never know where it's going to take you." Victor raised his glass in a toast. "To unexpected journeys," he said, his voice warm with affection, "and to the strength it takes to navigate them." As they clinked glasses, Lucas felt a wave of emotion wash over him, and he thought about all the twists and turns that had led him to this moment, the tragedy that had nearly broken him, the love that had saved him, and the purpose he had found in helping others. Later that night, as Lucas stood on the balcony of his hotel room, looking out over the city lights, he reflected on the day's events. The initiative he had launched was ambitious, with the potential to impact thousands of lives across the country. It was a responsibility he didn't take lightly, but one he felt ready to shoulder. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen, his former therapist and now a close friend and advisor. "Watched your speech online. You've come so far, Lucas. Remember, your story is a beacon of hope for others still finding their way through the storm." Lucas smiled, typing back a heartfelt thank you. Dr. Chen had been instrumental in his healing journey, helping him navigate the complex emotions surrounding his past and his relationship with David. Her words reminded him of how far he had come and how much further he still hoped to go. As he prepared for bed, Lucas's mind drifted to the future. There were still challenges ahead: expanding the initiative, continuing to advocate for mental health reform, balancing his public life with his personal one. But for the first time in a long while, he felt truly ready for whatever lay ahead. The boy who had once been thrown into the sea had not only learned to swim, he had become a lifeguard, reaching out to others still struggling in the waters of family mental illness. And in doing so, he had found a sense of purpose and fulfillment beyond anything he could have imagined. As sleep began to claim him, Lucas smiled. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to make a difference, new stories to hear, new lives to touch. And he was ready for all of it, buoyed by the love of his family, the strength of his experiences, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, hope could be found. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But Lucas knew that whatever storms lay ahead, he had the tools, the support, and the resilience to weather them. And in doing so, he would continue to light the way for others, turning the pain of his past into a beacon of hope for the future. The gentle lapping of waves against the shore provided a soothing backdrop as Lucas stood on the beach, his toes sinking into the worn sand. At 40, he found himself back at the very coastline where his life had changed so dramatically all those years ago. But this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, her curly hair whipping in the ocean breeze. Her small hand was clasped tightly in his, a gesture of both comfort and connection. This trip had been months in the planning, a carefully considered decision made with Emma's support and guidance from Dr. Chen. "Is this where it happened, Dad?" Lily asked, her voice quiet but steady. Lucas nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "Yes, sweetheart. This is where your grandfather, where David tried to hurt me." Lily's grip on his hand tightened. They had been slowly introducing her to the full story of Lucas's past, answering her questions with age-appropriate honesty. Today marked the first time they had visited this place together, a step in helping Lily understand her family's complex history. "Were you scared?" she asked, her big brown eyes looking up at him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Lucas crouched down to her level, meeting her gaze. "I was terrified," he admitted. "It was the scariest moment of my life. But you know what? It also led me to some of the best things in my life, to Grandpa Victor, to the work I do now, and eventually to your mom and you." Lily considered this for a moment, her young face scrunched in thought. "Is that why you always say that bad things can sometimes lead to good things?" A smile tugged at Lucas's lips. "That's exactly why, Lilybug. Life isn't always easy, but how we choose to respond to the hard times can shape our whole future." As they stood there, watching the waves roll in, Lucas marveled at the resilience of children. Lily had taken in the story of his past with a maturity beyond her years, asking thoughtful questions and showing a deep empathy for both Lucas and David. "Dad," Lily's voice broke through his thoughts, "can we go see Grandpa David now?" Lucas nodded, feeling a familiar mix of emotions at the thought of seeing his biological father. Their relationship had continued to evolve over the years, marked by honest conversations, shared therapy sessions, and a mutual commitment to healing. David had become a doting grandfather to Lily, his interactions with her always supervised but filled with genuine love and remorse for the past. They made their way off the beach and to the car, where Emma was waiting. Her smile was warm but tinged with concern as she took in Lucas's expression. "How did it go?" she asked softly as Lily clambered into the back seat. "Better than I expected," Lucas replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "She's an amazing kid, Em, so understanding, so compassionate." Emma's eyes shone with pride. "She takes after her dad that way." The drive to the assisted living facility, where David now resided, was filled with Lily's chatter about what she wanted to tell her grandfather. At 70, David's health had begun to decline, but his mind remained sharp, focused on making the most of the time he had left. As they walked through the facility's gardens, Lucas felt the familiar tightening in his chest that always accompanied these visits. But it was tempered now by a deep understanding of the journey they had all taken to reach this point. David's face lit up as he saw them approach, his smile widening as Lily ran ahead to give him a careful hug. "There's my favorite storyteller," he said, his voice rougher than it once was but still warm. "Have you come to share another adventure with your old grandpa?" As Lily launched into a vivid retelling of their beach visit, Lucas and Emma settled onto a nearby bench. Lucas watched the interaction between his daughter and his father, marveling at the healing power of time and forgiveness. "You okay?" Emma asked softly, her hand finding his. Lucas nodded, giving her hand a squeeze. "Yeah, I am. It's still surreal sometimes seeing them together. But it's good. It's part of our story." As the afternoon wore on, Lucas found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. The scared boy thrown into the sea had become a man dedicated to helping others navigate their own storms. The father who had once caused so much pain was now a repentant grandfather, cherishing every moment with the family he had nearly lost. Later, as they said the goodbyes and promised to visit again soon, David pulled Lucas aside. "I know I've said it 1,000 times," he began, his eyes glistening, "but I'm so proud of you, son. The man you've become, the father you are to Lily, it's more than I ever deserved." Lucas felt the familiar sting of tears. "Thank you, Dad," he said softly. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" David nodded, a lifetime of regret and gratitude evident in his expression. "We have. And it's all thanks to your strength, your capacity for forgiveness. You've taught me so much, Lucas." As they drove home, Lily fast asleep in the back seat, Lucas and Emma talked quietly about the day's events. The visit to the beach, the time with David, it was all part of the ongoing process of healing, of weaving their past into the fabric of their present and future. "But you know," Emma said thoughtfully, "I was thinking about your next book. Have you considered writing something for children? Something that could help kids understand family mental health issues?" Lucas blinked, surprised by the idea but immediately intrigued. "That's actually a really great idea, Em. A way to reach families earlier, to start those important conversations." As they continued to discuss the possibility, Lucas felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over him. Every step of his journey, from that terrible night in the ocean to this moment, had led him here, to a life filled with love, purpose, and the opportunity to make a real difference in the world. That night, as Lucas tucked Lily into bed, she asked for a story. "Tell me again about the boy who learned to swim through storms, Dad," she said sleepily. Lucas smiled, settling in beside her. As he began the familiar tale, a gentler metaphorical version of his own story, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the second chances he had been given, for the family he had built, and for the opportunity to turn his pain into purpose. The journey wasn't over. There would always be new challenges to face, new stories to tell, new ways to reach out and help others. But Lucas knew that whatever lay ahead, he had the strength, the support, and the resilience to face it. As Lily drifted off to sleep, Lucas quietly left her room, pausing in the doorway to look back at his daughter. In her he saw the future, a future bright with possibility, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of family love. With a contented sigh, Lucas made his way to his study. He had a new book to start planning, a new way to share his message of hope and healing with the world. The boy who had once been thrown into the sea had become a man who could navigate any storm. And now he was ready to help the next generation learn to swim. A warm glow of the computer screen illuminated Lucas's face as he put the final touches on his latest manuscript. At 45, he had just completed what he considered to be his most important work yet, a children's book series aimed at helping young people understand and cope with family mental health issues. As he saved the document and leaned back in his chair, Lucas felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This project had been brewing for years, ever since Emma had first suggested the idea. It had taken time to find the right approach, to strike the delicate balance between honesty and hope that children needed. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his reverie. "Dad," Lily's voice called out. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart," Lucas replied, swiveling his chair to face the door. Lily entered, now a poised 15-year-old with her mother's kind eyes and her father's determined spirit. She held a familiar-looking book in her hands, the first in Lucas's new series, hot off the press. "I just finished reading it," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "Dad, it's amazing. I wish I had something like this when I was younger, when I was first learning about our family's history." Lucas felt his heart swell with pride and love. "Thank you, Lily. That means more to me than you know. Come here." As Lily settled into his lap, a habit she hadn't quite outgrown despite her teenage years, Lucas marveled at how far they had all come. His daughter, once a curious child grappling with her family's complex past, had blossomed into a compassionate young woman with a keen interest in psychology and a passion for helping others. "You know," Lily said, tracing the book's colourful cover with her finger, "I've been thinking a lot about Grandpa David lately. About his journey and yours. I think I want to do something like what you do, Dad. Help families dealing with mental health issues." Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. "I think that's wonderful, Lily. You have such a big heart and you've seen firsthand the impact this work can have. Whatever path you choose, your mom and I will support you all the way." As they sat there, discussing Lily's dreams for the future, Lucas's mind drifted to David. His biological father had passed away peacefully 2 years ago, but not before seeing the man Lucas had become and forming a loving relationship with his granddaughter. Their reconciliation had been a powerful testament to the possibility of healing and growth, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The next morning, Lucas found himself standing in front of a packed auditorium at a national mental health conference. As he prepared to unveil his new book series, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this moment. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady and warm. "Today, I'm not just here as an author or a mental health advocate. I'm here as a son, a father, and a survivor. The books we're launching today are born from my own experiences, from the struggles and triumphs of my family, and from the countless stories I've had the privilege of hearing from families like yours over the years." As Lucas spoke, he could see the impact of his words rippling through the audience. There were nods of understanding, tears of recognition, and faces alight with hope. "These books are not just stories," he continued. "They're tools for healing, for opening up difficult conversations, and for showing children that they are not alone in their experiences. They are a promise that no matter how dark things might seem, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow." And after the presentation, as Lucas signed books and spoke with attendees, he was struck by the number of people who shared their own stories with him. Parents seeking advice on how to talk to their children about a family member's mental illness. Adults who had grown up in households affected by mental health issues, seeing their childhood experiences reflected in Lucas's words. One woman, her eyes brimming with tears, clasped Lucas's hand tightly. "Your book about the boy thrown into the sea, it saved my life when I was a teenager," she said. "And now your children's books will help me explain to my own kids why their dad sometimes has bad days. Thank you for giving us the words we need." As the day wound down, Lucas found a quiet moment to call home. Emma's voice, warm and loving as always, was a balm to his soul. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than I could have imagined," Lucas replied, a smile in his voice. The response has been incredible. I think we're really going to make a difference with these books." "Of course you are," Emma said, her pride evident even through the phone. "You've been making a difference every day since I've known you, Lucas. These books are just the latest chapter in your story." That evening, as Lucas boarded his flight home, he found himself thinking about the long arc of his life. From a terrified boy fighting for survival in the cold ocean to a man dedicating his life to helping others navigate their own storms. It hadn't been an easy journey, but every step had led him here, to a place where he could use his experiences to light the way for others. As the plane took off, Lucas opened his laptop, already jotting down ideas for his next project. There was still so much work to be done, so many families in need of support and understanding. But for the first time in a long while, Lucas felt a sense of true contentment. He had faced his deepest fears, reconciled with his past, and built a life filled with love and purpose. The boy who had once been thrown into the sea had not only learned to swim, he had become a lighthouse, guiding others through their own turbulent waters. As the city lights faded below him, Lucas closed his eyes, feeling grateful for every twist and turn that had brought him to this moment. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it felt like it was just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, Lucas knew he had the strength, the support, and the unwavering commitment to make a difference, one story at a time. The sea that had once threatened to claim him had become a source of inspiration, a wellspring of stories that could heal and transform. And Lucas, once a victim of circumstance, now stood as a living testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As the plane soared through the night sky, carrying him back to the loving arms of his family, Lucas smiled. The story of the boy thrown into the sea had evolved into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. It had become a beacon of hope, a bridge of understanding, and a promise that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward, always a new chapter waiting to be written. Dear listeners, as we reach the end of Lucas's incredible journey, let's take a moment to reflect on the profound message his story carries. Life can throw us into stormy seas without warning, leaving us feeling lost, betrayed, and alone. But even in our darkest moments, when the waves of pain and fear threaten to overwhelm us, remember this: you have an innate strength within you, a resilience that can weather any storm. Lucas's journey from a traumatized child to a beacon of hope shows us that our past does not define our future. Every challenge, every heartbreak, every moment of despair can become a stepping stone to something greater. Your pain can become your purpose. Your struggles can become your strength. To those of you fighting your own battles, feeling the weight of family mental illness, or grappling with betrayal, you are not alone. For your story matters. Your pain is valid, but know this: healing is possible. Forgiveness, even in the face of unimaginable hurt, can set you free. Remember, the same sea that threatens to drown you can become the source of your greatest inspiration. The darkest night eventually gives way to dawn, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the words "I survived." You have the power to rewrite your story, to turn your tears into triumphs, your scars into stars that guide others. Like Lucas, you too can become a lighthouse, illuminating the path for those still lost in the storm. So stand tall, brave heart, embrace your journey with all its twists and turns. For in your resilience, in your capacity to love and forgive, in your determination to rise above the waves, therein lies your true strength, your true beauty. You are not just surviving, you are writing a story of hope, healing, and the indomitable human spirit. And that story has the power to change lives, including your own. Remember, you are stronger than the storm. You are the author of your destiny, and your story is far from over. We're truly grateful for your time and attention in experiencing Lucas's powerful journey with us. For your engagement and emotional connection to these stories are what inspire us to keep creating meaningful content. If Lucas's story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts and feelings are invaluable to us and help shape the stories we tell. Please take a moment to share your impressions in the comments section below. If you found Lucas's journey inspiring and would like to see more stories like this, simply comment with a 1. Your support encourages us to continue exploring these profound human experiences. Curious about what happens next in Lucas's life? Eager to see how his impact grows? If you're interested in a potential part 2 to this story, let us know by commenting too. Your enthusiasm could be the spark that ignites the next chapter. We understand that everyone's perspective is unique. If there are aspects of the story you didn't agree with or would like to discuss further, we welcome your thoughtful comments. Your insights help us grow and improve our storytelling. Lastly, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your subscription is more than just a number to us. It's a show of support for our team and the work we pour our hearts into. It helps us continue bringing you these touching, life-affirming stories that remind us of the resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for being part of our community. Together we can explore the depths of human experience and emerge with hope, understanding, and compassion. We're excited to continue this journey with you.